Person, right? The one who's super confident about something they're, well, just not very good at. Or maybe you've been on the flip side. You're the expert in the room, but you're also the one full of doubt. Turns out there's a name for this weird paradox. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And today, we're going to dive into why we're often so bad at judging our own abilities.
And hey, this isn't some brand new discovery. Long before psychologists gave it a fancy name, Charles Darwin himself pointed out this exact quirk in human nature. This idea that knowing just a little bit can make you dangerously confident, that's exactly what we're talking about.
So what is it officially? The Dunning-Kruger effect is this cognitive bias that kind of works both ways. On one side, you have people with low ability in something who don't even have the skills to realize they're incompetent. So naturally, they think they're doing great. But here's the wild part. On the other side, you have highly competent people who think that if something's easy for them, it must be easy for everyone. And because of that, they actually underestimate just how good they are.
And you see this play out everywhere. I mean, think about the beginner chess player who wins a couple of games against their friends and suddenly feels ready to take on a grandmaster. Or that new driver who's absolutely convinced they've got the skills of a pro race car driver. It's not always about just being arrogant. It's about not knowing enough to see how much you don't know.
But look, this isn't just some casual observation. It's been tested again and again. So let's check out how a pretty recent study from 2022 put this whole thing under the microscope in an online college course.
The setup was actually pretty straightforward. You had first-year college students taking 4 tests for their class. After each one, before they got their grade, they were asked a simple question. How well do you think you did? They had to guess their score and then say how confident they were in that guess. Simple, right?
Well, the results were crystal clear. The students who are in the bottom half of the class, the lower performers, massively overestimated how well they did. And at the same time, the top-performing students, they actually tended to underestimate their own scores. It was like a perfect textbook example of the theory playing out in real life.
So just how big was this overestimation? On average, the students in the bottom half pumped up their actual scores by a whopping 13.5%. Think about it. That can be the difference between passing and failing or getting a C instead of an A. And what's really wild is that they were just as confident in their wildly wrong guesses as the high performers were in their much more accurate ones.
And this brings us right to the core theory from the psychologists who named the effect, David Dunning and Justin Kruger. They called it the dual burden. See, the problem for someone who's unskilled isn't just that they're unskilled. Is that the very skills they're missing are the same ones you need to evaluate ability in the first place, both in yourself and in other people. So they're doubly burdened. They're not good at the thing, and they're not even aware of it.
Now, this all seems pretty straightforward, right? But hold on, because there's a whole debate brewing under the surface. Some researchers are now arguing that our popular understanding of Dunning-Kruger might be a product of the effect itself. Let's get into the critiques.
To put it bluntly, some critics are really skeptical. This quote from a Reddit thread kind of captures that feeling perfectly. The argument is that the theory just feels good to people who already think they're pretty knowledgeable, because it paints other people as both ignorant and arrogant. It sets up this really convenient us versus them dynamic.
So this debate really boils down to 2 main camps. Is it a real psychological flaw, that dual burden we talked about, or is it mostly just a statistical illusion? The other side argues that what we're seeing is just a mix of regression to the mean, which is a fancy way of saying random guesses tend to fall closer to the average, plus the fact that most of us tend to think we're a little better than average anyway. Is it psychology, or is it just math?
Critics also poke holes in the methods of the original 1999 study. For instance, one of the skills they tested was humor. To do that, they had professional comedians rate a bunch of jokes to create an objective scale of what's funny. But can humor ever really be objective? It's a fair point, right? How do you reliably measure these really subjective skills?
And this all leads to the ultimate metacritique, this kind of brain-bending idea of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The question is this theory so popular just because experts told us it was true and we're all wired to believe what experts say? It makes you wonder, are we falling for an appeal to authority, just accepting a theory because it confirms our own biases about other people?
Okay, academic debates aside, what does all of this actually mean for us in our day-to-day? Let's pull this whole concept out of the lab and into the real world.
It is so crucial to not get this mixed up with its more famous cousin, imposter syndrome. They're basically mirror images. Dunning-Kruger is overconfidence that comes from a lack of self-awareness. Imposter syndrome is that nagging self-doubt you feel despite all the evidence of your success, often driven by too much self-awareness. One is not seeing your flaws, the other is only seeing your flaws. And in the workplace?
Oh boy, this bias can cause some real problems. You get people overestimating their skills, jumping into projects they have no business leading, and making huge mistakes. But maybe worst of all, it kills personal growth. Because think about it, if you don't know you have a weakness, why would you ever work on it? So what's the solution? How do we fight back? Well, for ourselves and for our teams, it really comes down to building a culture of humility. That means you've got to actively seek out feedback, you've got to commit to always be learning, use real data to measure performance, and maybe most important of all, make it safe for people to just say, you know what, I don't know, or I need help.
Okay, so after looking at the science, the critiques, and the real-world impact, what's the big takeaway here? What's the one thing you really need to remember?
First, and this is critical, the Dunning-Kruger effect is not a fancy way of calling people stupid. It's not about intelligence at all. It's about specific skills in specific areas. A brilliant physicist could be a terrible cook and have absolutely no idea. We all have blind spots. We are all unskilled in something.
And that leads us to this perfect, kind of mind-bending summary from David Dunning himself. The ultimate paradox of this whole effect is that the people who are most deep in it are, by definition, the least likely to know it. It's a club where ignorance is the price of admission and you don't even realize you're a member.
Which leaves us all with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. If we can't easily see our own incompetence, what are you going to do to find yours? Because just knowing that this bias exists in every single one of us, that's the first and maybe the most important step toward actually knowing yourself.